The fluorescent lights of the convenience store buzzed overhead as Sarah's trembling fingers counted the coins for the third time. 47 cents. That's all that stood between her baby daughter and another hungry night. The formula canister on the counter seemed to mock her at $12.99, glaring in red numbers that might as well have been $1 million. Behind her, the line was growing, impatient sighs filling the air like accusations. Sarah's cheeks burned with shame as she looked at the cashier, a young woman whose expression had already shifted from neutral to annoyed. This was it. This was the moment every struggling parent dreaded, the moment when you had to choose between your pride and your child's survival. Sarah had never imagined her life would come to this, standing in a convenience store at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, unable to afford the most basic necessity for her 6-month-old daughter. Just 6 months ago, Sarah had been living what she thought was a stable life. She had a decent job at a local accounting firm, a small but cozy apartment, and dreams of providing everything her unborn baby would need. Then came the complications during delivery, the emergency C-section, the extended hospital stay, and the crushing medical bills that followed. Her employer, a small family business struggling to stay afloat, couldn't hold her position any longer. Within weeks, Sarah found herself drowning in debt with no income and a newborn who depended entirely on her. She had applied for assistance programs, waited in endless lines at social services, filled out form after form. But bureaucracy moved slowly, and babies didn't wait. Her mother, who might have helped, lived 3 states away and was caring for Sarah's ailing stepfather. Friends had their own struggles, their own families to feed. Sarah had sold everything of value: her laptop, her television, even the jewelry her grandmother had left her. The 47 cents in her palm represented the absolute bottom, the place where rock bottom had a basement. "Mom, do you have a card or something?" the cashier asked, her voice edged with impatience. "There are other customers waiting." Sarah felt the hot sting of tears threatening to spill over. I thought I had enough," she whispered, knowing it was a lie even as she said it. She had known exactly how much was in her pocket. She had just hoped, desperately, impossibly, that somehow the universe would bend in her favor just this once. "Look, I can't just give you the formula," the cashier said, not unkindly, but with the weariness of someone who had heard every sob story and couldn't afford to care about any of them. "If you can't pay for it, I need you to step aside." Sarah's hand went instinctively to her phone in her pocket, though she knew it was pointless. She had already called the 2 people who might have been able to help. Neither had answered. Her checking account had been overdrawn for days. She was out of options, out of time, out of miracles. "I understand," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. She began to step away from the counter, her mind already racing through impossible calculations. Maybe she could water down the last ounce of formula she had at home, make it stretch until morning when she could try the food bank again. She knew it was dangerous, knew that diluting formula could harm her baby, but what choice did she have? "Excuse me," the voice came from behind her, deep and gentle. "I'd like to pay for that." Sarah turned to see a man in his 50s, dressed in an expensive-looking suit that seemed oddly out of place in the shabby convenience store. His eyes were kind, crow's feet crinkling at the corners as he offered her a small smile. He was already pulling out his wallet, extracting a credit card with the casual ease of someone for whom $12 was utterly insignificant. "No, I couldn't," Sarah protested automatically, though every fiber of her being wanted to scream yes, please, thank you. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, but accepting charity from strangers felt like admitting defeat in the most final way. "It's already done," the man said, handing his card to the cashier before Sarah could protest further. He glanced at the formula canister and then at Sarah, really looking at her for the first time. His expression shifted, something like recognition or understanding crossing his features. "Actually, could you add 3 more of those?" he asked the cashier. "Sir, that's really not necessary," Sarah began, but her voice cracked, and suddenly the tears she'd been holding back spilled down her cheeks. She was crying in a convenience store, in front of strangers, and she couldn't even summon the energy to be embarrassed about it. The man waited patiently as the transaction processed, then took the bag from the cashier and gently placed it in Sarah's hands. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah," she managed to say through her tears. "Sarah Mitchell. I don't know how to thank you. I'll pay you back, I promise. If you give me your address or he held up a hand, stopping her. "No need for that." "But Sarah, I have to ask her, why didn't you tell me?" She looked at him in confusion, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Tell you what? I don't understand. Do we know each other?" The man's expression grew more serious. "We do, actually. You might not remember me, but 3 years ago, you were working at Morris & Associates, the accounting firm downtown, right?" Sarah nodded slowly, bewildered by the turn the conversation had taken. "My company was going through a difficult merger," he continued. "There was a major accounting error that threatened the entire deal, millions of dollars, hundreds of jobs on the line. You found the error, you worked through the night, if I remember correctly, to trace it back to its source and fix it. You saved that merger, Sarah. You saved my company." The memory came back to her in a rush, or the late night at the office, the spreadsheets that wouldn't balance, the moment she'd found the transposed numbers that had cascaded into a catastrophic miscalculation. She had been so focused on solving the problem that she hadn't thought much about the client, just another name on a file. "You're Marcus Chen," she breathed. "Chen Technologies," he nodded. "And you never asked for recognition, never tried to leverage what you did into a better position or a bonus. You just fixed the problem because it needed fixing. When I called your boss the next day to thank him, he told me it was you who'd done the work, staying until 3 in the morning to get it right." Sarah felt dizzy, the surreal quality of the conversation overwhelming her already fragile emotional state. Marcus Chen was a tech industry legend, one of those self-made billionaires who appeared in Forbes articles and gave TED Talks. "Why didn't you tell me you needed help?" Marcus asked again, his voice gentle but insistent. "After what you did for my company, for the 1,000 employees whose jobs you saved, why didn't you reach out?" Sarah struggled to find words. "It never occurred to me. You were just a client. I was just doing my job. And after everything fell apart, I was so ashamed. I didn't want anyone to see me like this." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Pride is expensive, Sarah, and kindness should never go unrewarded, even if the person who showed it doesn't expect anything in return." He pulled a business card from his wallet and pressed it into her hand. "This has my personal cell phone number on it. I want you to call me tomorrow morning. I have a position in my company's accounting department that I think you'd be perfect for. It comes with health insurance, childcare assistance, and a signing bonus that should help you get back on your feet." Sarah stared at the card, unable to process what was happening. "I don't understand. Why would you do this?" "Because 3 years ago, you saved my company without asking for anything. Tonight, I have the chance to return that kindness." Marcus smiled. "And because I believe in a world where good people catch breaks when they need them." "You're a good person, Sarah. You just hit a rough patch. Let me help you through it." The next few weeks passed in a blur that felt like a dream. Sarah called the number on the card, expecting voicemail or an assistant, but Marcus himself answered. Within days, she had an interview, and within a week, she had a job offer that exceeded anything she'd hoped for. The signing bonus cleared her debts. The health insurance covered the follow-up appointments she'd been putting off. The on-site childcare meant she could bring her daughter to work with her, checking on her throughout the day. But the most surprising part came a month into her new position. Marcus called her into his office and explained that he'd been thinking about her situation, about how many other talented people might be struggling in silence, too proud or too ashamed to ask for help. He wanted to start a program within his companion emergency assistance fund for employees and their families, backed by the corporation but accessible without shame or judgment. "I want you to help me run it," Marcus said. "You understand what it's like to be at that breaking point. You'll know how to help others with dignity." Sarah thought about that night in the convenience store, about the 47 cents and the impossible choice she'd faced. She thought about all the other parents, all the other people struggling quietly, desperately, invisibly, and she said yes. The program launched 6 months later. In its first year, it helped over 200 families, providing emergency funds for food, housing, medical care, and childcare. Sarah personally reviewed every application, remembering how it felt to count coins with trembling fingers, to weigh pride against survival. One evening, 2 years after that night in the convenience store, Sarah stood at a company event as Marcus announced the program's expansion to other corporations across the country. As he spoke about the importance of catching people when they fall, of extending help without judgment, he caught her eye and smiled. After the event, he approached her. "You know," he said, "I often think about what would have happened if I hadn't been in that store that night. If I'd taken a different route home, if I'd been 10 minutes earlier or later." Such a small coincidence, but it changed everything. Sarah nodded, holding her daughter, a now energetic 2-year-old, on her hip. "I think about it too, but I don't think it was just coincidence. I think kindness finds a way. You helped me because I helped you, even though neither of us planned it that way. Maybe that's how the world is supposed to work." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "Or maybe we just need to make it work that way. One person at a time. You did it for me. I did it for you. Now we're doing it for others." Kindness multiplies, Sarah. It compounds like interest. As Sarah drove home that night, her daughter sleeping in the back seat, she thought about the journey from that desperate moment to this one. The world hadn't changed yet. There were still people counting coins, still parents facing impossible choices, still good people hitting rock bottom through no fault of their own. But maybe, just maybe, there were also enough people willing to help, willing to see someone's struggle and say, "Let me carry that with you." She never forgot the weight of those 47 cents in her palm, the cold certainty that she had nothing left to give. She carried that memory with her, not as a wound but as a reminder that everyone has a story, everyone has struggles, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Sometimes, all it takes is someone who sees you, really sees you, and says the most powerful words in any language: "Let me help."